Welcome to the Coalition. I'm your host, Jacob Moss.
I'm your host, Alex Williams.
So today we're going to talk about all of the lands in Commander, or we're going to talk about what lands we think you should run.
Yep. So there's many different kinds of lands in Commander.
And I guess we can't get to every possible card for every possible deck, but we're going to talk about main ones that are good in a lot of decks.
Yeah. So how many lands do you usually run in your decks?
I'm usually on the higher end. I like to run between I'd hate to go less than 36, but I like to stay between 38, 39 to 40.
Yeah. So I run around 34. So, but some of my decks run less. Yeah. So, but I try to stay around that number. So, I guess we'll just get into it. So, our first section is going to be Mdfcs, and these are all lands that they're lands in the back of the card, and you can play it as land or you can play it as a spell that's on the front. So there's a bunch of different kinds, but there's a cycle. There's a couple different cycles. There's a cycle of mythic ones. It's a big spell on the front, and then it's a land in the back that you can pay, or you can play it, and it's just tapped unless you pay 3 life. So it's kind of like a shock bolt land kind of thing. So
the mythics are all pretty good, and they're nice because when you play them as a land, they can enter untapped. I'd say the best one is Agadeem's Awakening, which is a black one that has 3 black pips, and then pay X, and you get to return any number of creatures with CMC X or less that each have a different converted mana cost. Yeah. So I'd say that's the best one just because you can get a lot of value off of it. Yeah. It's also the most expensive. So I guess we're not going to get into all of them because they're all pretty similar and they're all pretty good.
Yeah.
They're all decently expensive.
They'll all be on screen too. So.
Yep. And then there's a few that we'd say are really good that aren't mythics or are uncommons, rares, and stuff. One of the best is probably Ball Guide Recovery, which is 2 colorless and a green to return target card from your graveyard to your hand, or a tapped green land on the other side.
Yeah. And then, another, there's a lot of, there's Sejiri's Shelter, Glassful Mimic, Valakut Awakening, so there's a lot of good ones.
Yep. Sejiri's Shelter gives something protection, or is a tapped land. Glassful Mimic is a efficient clone spell or a blue tapped land, and then Valakut Awakening is a really good card draw card for red or a tapped red land.
Yeah, so pretty good. So our next section is going to be just lands that are used to tap for mana, basically. So nothing crazy, but it's just lands to tap for mana. So there's bounce lands, and there's a few different cycles of these, or there's 2, I believe, 2 main ones, and so there's the main one, which is they have 2 each one. There's 10 of them. Each one has two colors, taps for 1 of 2 colors, and or taps for both of each colors. And when you play it and just battlefield tapped, you have to return a land to your hand when you play it. So there's that, and then there's the other one that's a lot worse that enters battlefield tapped, and you have to return a untapped basic land of that type, of whatever it taps for, and then it taps for colorless and then a color. So there's 5 of them.
And then there's one last one which enters, it's like the original ones that we talked about, but it enters tapped and you have to return a land to your hand, but it taps for 2 colorless.
Yeah. So it's a little bit different, but it's a lot like the first one.
So these are really good because they're kind of like color fixing because they tap for 2 colors. They are kind of like card advantage because it's 2 land drops in one. And they don't really slow you down as much because you can return a tapped land to your hand. They also can give you more landfall triggers, and they can bounce themselves. That probably doesn't matter a whole lot. Yeah. But, if you're a landfall deck needing more landfall triggers and you're running out of lands, it's an option.
So next is lands with land types. So shock lands, dual lands, triomes, and then the Kaldheim tapped lands. So these all have basic land types, the actual basic land types, and they can tap for 1 of 2 or 1 of 3 colors. The triomes have cycling. But shocks, you can pay 2 life to have them enter the battlefield untapped. There's 10 of them. Dual lands, you don't have to pay 2 life. They're the same thing as the shock lands, but you don't have to pay 2 life. And then there's 10 of them. They're really expensive, though. Triomes are tap for 1 of 3 colors, and then it has cycling. And then the Kaldheim tap lands are like shock lands, but you can't shock them in to be untapped, and they're also snow permanents. So.
The Kaldheim tap lands are very budget alternatives to the other ones we mentioned because, the cheapest one of the other ones is like $8.
Yeah, it's really expensive.
They all get pretty expensive. And these are actually really good in combination with cards like Fetchlands.
Yeah.
So Fetchlands, there are lands, there's a cycle of 10 of them. 10 of the main ones that have tap, sacrifice, pay a life, search a library for, and then it lists one of two, or lists two basic land types that you can get. So forest, plains, islands, mountain, or swamp. And you can get one of those. And you can fetch a shockland, triome, or one of the call time lands. So they're obviously very good.
Yeah.
They give you more landfall triggers, and they can pretty much give you any color you want.
Yeah. And we've gone into how good Fetchlands are before, so there's just so many different uses for them.
So, and then there's also lands that just kind of tap for any mana. So the main one being Command Tower, named after the format. There's City of Brass and Mana Confluence. And then two ones that are kind of similar to each other are Exotic Orchard and Reflecting Pool. Exotic Orchard can only tap for what your opponent's lands can produce, and Reflecting Pool can only tap for what your lands can produce. Yeah. So a good way to get, better mana fixing. Especially Reflecting Pool gets a lot better when you have triomes, because even though you have access to all three colors, you might not have access to all three colors at the same time.
Reflecting Pool is also really good in combination with just a land that can tap for any color, because then that will tap for any color.
Yep. So it just can kind of help fix your mana a little bit better.
And obviously, a lot of these are pretty expensive. I mean, Reflecting Pool, City of Brass, and Mana Confluence are around $20 to $30, and the other ones are fairly cheap, but
Exotic Orchard's good because you have three opponents, so someone probably will tap for most of your colors. So I guess let's talk about some lands that can ramp you, because we all like ramping. So these are kind of lands that tap for multiple mana in a way, or they can kind of get you more lands. So ones that tap for multiple mana are Ancient Tomb, which is probably the best. It has tap, add 2 colorless, take 2 damage, which that's really good. We don't need to say much. It's banned in quite a few formats just because of how much value you can get and how much speed and tempo you can gain with that land. It's really good in Commander, and that's why it's expensive. So Temple of the False God is kind of similar, mostly not though. It has tap, add 2 colorless. You don't take 2 damage, but you can only activate if you have 5 or more lands.
Yeah, and so it's a little slower, and because in the front, you're getting your opening hand, it's usually not that great. So,
yep, it's a land drop, but it doesn't do anything till much later. Yeah. So, and then there's 2 lands that can tap for multiple, which are like Gaia's Cradle and Nykthos Shrine to Nyx. Nykthos only helps if you have a lot of devotion, so it's really only good in 1 to 2 color decks. And then Gaia's Cradle is just incredibly broken if you have a whole bunch of creatures. Yeah. So, and then there's some lands that can get you more lands, which are Blighted Woodland and Myriad Landscape are the 2 main ones. Yep. And then there's also Crozen Verge, which couples really well with the lands we mentioned previously that have the land types, because Crozen Verge can get you a forest and a plains.
Which could be a triumph. 2 triumphs.
2 triomes, 2 shocks, or 2 call time lands. Because Crozen Verge is not an expensive card. So
they should finish the cycle, though. Or make a cycle. There's only one of them.
That would be nice, and I think that definitely could be good for some of the colors. So, yeah. The ramp spells, they're usually inefficient. I'd say Myriad Landscape is decent to run in, like, a non-green deck, because it's a way to ramp, but other than that, I wouldn't say it's very...
Blighted Woodland is green, which is funny, because you just run up ramp spell instead.
Yep. So, not much to say about those, but there are always options. So, let's talk about some utility lands. So, one of the most popular utility lands in the format is Command Beacon, and that's because Command Beacon has tap, add a colorless, or tap, sacrifice, return your commander from your command zone to your hand.
Yep. So if your commander costs a lot more to play, you can get it into your hand and just play it for its mana cost.
So if your deck focuses on your commander, or even just wanting to cast your commander multiple times, that's really good. Then there's Sanctum of Eternity, which is a way to return your commander from the battlefield to your hand. So if your commander has a powerful cast trigger like Maelstrom Wanderer, or if it has a powerful ETB trigger like Sakashima, you can get more value out of it.
Yeah. And, so those are pretty good. There's also utility lands that draw you cards. So these are a little slower, but
they're usually pretty inefficient.
They're usually pretty inefficient because, like War Room and Bonders Enclave, 2 examples. War Room is 3 tap, pay life equal to the number of colors in your commander's color identity, and then you draw a card. So if your commander has 3 colors, you're paying 3 life to draw a card and 3 mana, and it's just, it's a lot to just draw 1 card. but
Yep.
can be useful. And
It essentially costs 4 mana plus at least 1 to 2 life.
Yeah.
So, and then Bonder's Enclave has 3 tap, draw a card, only if you control a creature with power 4 or greater.
Yeah.
So, these cards, paying 4 mana for 1 card, that's pretty inefficient. But it is on a land, so if you have nothing better to do, those are the 2 best ones, I'd probably say.
yeah, but they're good to run in decks that need to draw cards.
And if you're not in, a whole lot of colors, you can afford to have a few colorless lands.
Yeah.
So, I guess we can kind of move on to the next section, which is a bunch of just kind of miscellaneous lands.
Yeah, not really any that could fit in other categories.
Yep, so one of our favorites, we've talked about it before, is Talaria West, which has enters battlefield tap for blue, or you can pay a colorless and 2 blue to transmute it. And what transmute means is you get to discard the card and search your library for a card that costs the same. So Talaria West is one of the best, I'd say, of these, because it can get you a land, it can get you Mana Crypt, it can get you Everflowing Chalice, or it can get you a card like Pact of Negation.
Yeah.
Or not. Yeah, I was right the first time. Yep.
So yeah, it's pretty powerful. Usually use it to transmute. Usually don't.
Play it as a land, unless you have nothing better to do.
So Plimken Village.
It's one of my favorites. Enters the battlefield, you may reveal an elemental. If you don't, it enters the battlefield tapped, and then it has tap, add red, or red, tap, target creature gains haste. So haste is obviously a very powerful effect, especially if you want your commander to get in. So if you're a Voltron deck, that's definitely a card to consider. If you just maybe need like a combat damage trigger, that's something to consider. And also, it can be a political tool because it just gives target creature haste. You can give something your opponents have haste.
Exactly.
You can give that Eldrazi Titan some haste.
As long as it's not swinging at me. So another example is like Karn's Bastion. 4 tap proliferate. It's pretty.
It's good in counter type decks.
Might want to run it in Planeswalkers or maybe even like poison counters.
It's kind of inefficient because you have to spend a lot of mana to get that effect, but it's also a land, so it can't hurt too bad. Then there's 2 lands that kind of do the same thing here.
So Maseveth Labyrinth of Scofos.
Maseveth has tap, remove target creature, or untap target creature. Untap target attacking creature, it doesn't deal or take damage this turn.
Yeah.
So Maseveth is a land that can't tap for mana, which is another reason to not put it in a land slot.
Yeah.
It can help if maybe you want to get attack triggers, but you don't want your guy to die, or if you just don't want to be attacked by something really large, like a Merit Lage token. And Labyrinth of Scofos is a land, it can tap for colorless, or it can pay 4 tap and remove target attacking or blocking creature from combat. There's another one, I think it's called Mystifying Maze.
Yep.
Mystifying Maze, and that one flickers a creature your opponent it can only do something your opponent controls, and then it like flickers till the end step. So that one's a lot worse because if your opponent gets an ETB trigger, hate to help them out there, but it's
Wish it was any creature because then you could do it on your own stuff.
Yep, and 5 mana. I mean, I don't think it would be that busted. 5 mana for a ETB trigger, it'd have to be pretty good. I guess an Avenger of Zendikar would be pretty good, but
Yeah.
then one of the ones I really like is Halimar Depths, which when it enters the battlefield, it enters tapped, and then you get to rearrange the top 3 cards of your library. You get to look at them and then rearrange them however you want.
It's kind of like a Senses Divining top kind of effect.
It's a really good card because let's say you're running a deck that likes to know what's on top of your library. Like, let's say your Maelstrom Wanderer deck. Getting to rearrange stuff can be pretty good. Let's say you're an Intet deck. Just knowing what's on top can be pretty good.
Yeah.
So if you involve Cascade or top manipulation or clashing, like if you're gonna cast
that clash.
want to cast Recross the Paths and get it again.
Yeah. So, and then last few miscellaneous are like Rogue's Passage and Access Tunnel, and they will just make it so they can't be blocked.
It could be good in some decks if you really need to make contact with someone. Like, let's say you're one of those 3-color combat damage dragon decks. It's a way to force that tap in if you're really reliant on it. Or let's say you're like a ninjutsu deck. It's a way to make something unblockable and get some damage in.
For Brago, it's always good too.
It could win you the game.
So yeah, so those cards.
So, and I guess the next section is tribal lands that we think are pretty good. So, three somewhat similar ones are Secluded Courtyard, Unclaimed Territory, and Cavern of Souls. Each of those, you pick a creature type when they enter, and then they tap for that mana of any color to cast that spell. Secluded Courtyard can spend that mana on activated abilities. Cavern of Souls makes it so that card can't be countered. Unclaimed Territory only taps for a mana to cast the spell. Another really good one, if your whole deck is tribal, is Path of Ancestry, which taps for any mana that you're in your commander's color identity, and then if it's spent on a creature that shares a creature type with your commander, you get to scry one.
Yeah, and enters battlefield tapped. So it's pretty good, and it's very cheap. It's a very cheap card too. So if you're running a tribal like 5-color deck, it's really good.
I mean, even if it's just like, let's say your 5-color deck, it could just be a land that enters the battlefield tapped and taps for any color.
Yeah, exactly.
It's pretty good.
Yeah. For dragons.
There's Haven of the Spirit Dragon and then Crucible of the Spirit Dragon. Haven can get you a dragon back, and Crucible can store some mana to spend later. I'd say Haven's pretty good, but I wouldn't say Crucible's very good.
Crucible's okay.
But Haven, I mean, just the fact that a land can get you a dragon back is pretty decent. For wizards, there's Riptide Laboratory, which I think is really good. It is a colorless blue tap, return target wizard from play to your hand.
Yeah.
And then it taps for colorless. But that can be really good, especially if you have a card like Archaeomancer. If you have a extra turn spell that doesn't get exiled in Archaeomancer, that's infinite turns.
Yeah.
A lot of mana, but I mean, it is there. Just, and the fact that that can be on a land, if you have like cards like Archaeomancer, Dualcaster Mage, Naru Meha, or let's say your commander's a wizard, and you have a few options.
You can save your commander too.
Yep, because you can do that at instant speed. So if you have like a Orvar, you can bounce it, so keep your commander alive. For elves, there's Volo. For elves, there's Wirewood Lodge, which taps for colorless or has green tap, untap target elf. There's a lot of elves with really good tap abilities, like adding a bunch of mana, maybe making some guys. So being able to get extra triggers off that just off a land is pretty good. Unholy Grotto is one of the more expensive ones from this cycle, and it has tap add colorless or black tap put target zombie from your graveyard on top of your library. Well, that's really good because that's just kind of graveyard recursion almost on a land. That's very powerful, as we've said before. Starlet Sanctum is one that I think is pretty good. I'm surprised how cheap it is a land that has tap add colorless or white tap sacrifice a cleric. You gain life equal to its toughness, or black tap sacrifice a cleric, deals damage equal to its power to target player. So it's a way to kind of damage your opponents if you have clerics, or gain some life.
If you're playing like aristocrats,
yep,
could be nice.
Shadowborn Apostles even could be. You have clerics that you want to die, maybe if you have like Athreos out. Then there's Contested Cliffs, which is not from that cycle, but it has tap add colorless or red-green tap target beast you control fights target creature and opponent controls. I mean, the fact is that's like removal on a land almost.
Pretty good, yeah.
Repeatable. It's pretty powerful. Another really good one is Swarm Yard, which has tap add a colorless or tap to regenerate target squirrel, insect, rat. Let's see if I'm forgetting any creature types with that one, because that has a lot of creature types on it. It can tap to regenerate target rat, spider, insect, or squirrel. So, if your commander is a changeling or one of those creature types, it can be a way to just protect it a little bit.
Or if you're playing one of those creature types.
Yeah. Pretty good. Chatterfang. That's a very powerful card. It was $10 until it got reprinted recently.
Locust God.
Locust God. Good card for that. Seraph Sanctuary is a land that says whenever an angel you control enters the battlefield, you gain a life. Or maybe it's a life for each angel you control. There's just one life. But it can get you a lot of value and can gain you a lot of life if you have a bunch of life gain triggers in your angel tribal deck, which you might have. So,
yeah. So a couple more.
Last two tribal ones, there's Animal Sanctuary, which says tap, or 2 colorless tap to put a 1/1 counter on target bird, cat, dog, goat, ox, or snake.
So similar to, multiple creature types.
A lot of creature types. It also can tap for colorless. So if your commander deck has like a dog or a cat, it can be a good way to put some counters on it for maybe some Voltron damage, or you can just, buff up, your creature if you're in one of those tribals. Yep, goat tribal. For all your goat tribal deck needs, go to Animal Sanctuary.
Exactly. Elephant Graveyard.
Elephant Graveyard is a very expensive, very old land that has tap, add colorless, or tap to regenerate turret elephant. I mean,
Changeling.
good in changeling decks. Good if you're an elephant deck, I guess, for all the elephant decks out there. And then, that's...
Another one I want to talk about is Interplanetary Beacon. So that one is whenever you cast a Planeswalker spell, you gain a life, and then it has like tap, add colorless, and then tap 1, tap, and then add 2 mana of any color. Only use it to cast Planeswalker spells. So it's similar. That's really good in like Planeswalker decks. It's kind of tribal.
Fix your mana.
Yeah.
So I guess let's talk about some lands that can actually win you
The game.
Yeah, there's a couple lands that actually could,
can win you the game. So one of them is Maze's End, which says exactly, I believe it enters the battlefield tapped, and then it can tap for colorless. And then I think it is 3 to tap and sacrifice it. And then you get to return it to its hand, and you get search your library, or 3 and tap and return it to its hand. And then you get to search your library for a gate card, put it into the battlefield, and then shuffle your library. And then if you control 10 or more gates with different names, you win the game. So that's a way to win the game with a land. I mean, just straight up. Just says you win the game. Not much more to be said. Then there's land like World Tree, which is good for other reasons than its win con.
It's an amazing land.
It has tap, add green, and then if you control 6 or more lands you control have tap, add a mana of any color.
Yeah, so it's like almost like a
It's like a
chromatic lantern.
Yeah.
But on a land.
Prismatic Omen, because it doesn't ramp you. But Prismatic Omen on a land, it's very powerful. And then you can tap for double Wooburg, and then tap and sacrifice a land. Search your library for any number of god cards and put them into play.
Yeah.
So if you're playing gods, that just means you win the game. If you're playing even just a couple gods, that could just mean you win the game. I mean, it's very...
Yeah, and I mean, you have it in your dragon deck. And I mean, it's not amazing to do, but if you sacrifice it, you get Morophon, you get Essica, and you get Time-At. That's a lot of stuff onto the board on a land.
But, Morophon is insane, so...
And it really is just 10 mana, not double Wooburg, because, your land's tap for any color.
Yeah, that's true.
So...
You do have to sacrifice World Tree, but, I mean, if you're just going to win the game, or if it's saving you from losing the game, it's worth it. So.
Yep. Then there's cards like Field of the Dead, which is land I haven't used because I haven't a deck that it fits in, but enters the battlefield tapped, and then whenever a land enters, if you control a land or 7 or more lands with different names, you get to create a 2/2 zombie token.
Yeah. So I can, in landfall decks, is it different names?
Yep, 7 or more lands with different names.
I didn't know that. So yeah, that could be in landfall. That could just be.
Yeah, in a landfall deck, that can just make you a whole bunch of 2/2s.
Yeah.
Or even and I mean, there's some decks that can get infinite landfall triggers. So that's infinite. If you have
Zombies.
Dualcaster Mage and Ghostly Flicker, that's infinite zombies right there.
Yeah.
And Field of the Dead does trigger on itself if you control 7 lands with different names. So it can win you the game there. Then there's Westvale Abbey, which has tap out a colorless, 5 tap, pay a life, put a 1/1 white and black human cleric creature token onto the battlefield, or 5 tap, sacrifice 5 creatures, and then you transform Westvale Abbey and untap it. And then it has flying, lifelink, indestructible, and haste. And it's a 9/7 Ormondal,
That
Profane
can
Prince.
pretty fast if it stays around.
Yep, and just the fact that it has lifelink and haste is nice to you sacrifice stuff and then it can kind of pad in your life total a little bit so you don't.
It's indestructible too. So.
Yep, so your land that you spent all that time working on doesn't just die. I mean, if your opponents go to board wipe, you can sacrifice 5 things if you're like a token deck, which is where you'd put this. Though you do have to be in black because it does have a black color identity.
Yeah.
But it can provide some good value.
So our next section is land combos. So there's a couple different land combos in the game that just use lands to just either win the game or do something pretty good. So Dark Depths and Thespian Stage is a huge one. Create a 20/20 for basically free. I mean, it's...
Yep, it's insane.
You end up sacrificing both Dark Depths and Thespian Stage, and you have to pay 3 mana but you get a 20/20 Merit Lage creature token, which has flying and indestructible.
Which can win the game pretty fast.
Yep.
So, another one is Cabal Coffers or Urborg, super popular. Just make all your lands black or swamps, and then just tap and add a bunch of mana.
Yep. So I can generate a lot of mana for you. And there's more of a convoluted combo here, and that is Nesting Grounds and Magasai the Water Veil.
And well, like you need something to proliferate, so you need like
Karn's Bastion.
Yeah.
It's kind of convoluted because I think you also need a creature that can untap a land. So what you need to do, so this combo has a lot more it takes to start the combo up, but it's a lot easier to keep the combo going.
It's pretty safe.
So if you have a card like Magasai the Water Veil, you can it has enters the battlefield tapped, and then it has blue tap to put an Aeon counter on it, or an Eon counter. And then you skip your next turn. And then it has tap, remove an Eon counter from it, return it to its hand, take an extra turn after this one. And Nesting Grounds has 1 tap, move a counter from target permanent you control to another target permanent. So
just move it to another land.
So you do is you put the counter on it, and then you proliferate, and then you move that second counter onto just another card, we'll say Nesting Grounds. And then you need to somehow either make it to your next turn or cast an extra turn spell. Or untap, or skip your turn and untap. And then at that point, it's a lot easier to keep the combo going.
Yeah.
And then all you need is a way to untap Magasai when you play it. So then you remove an Eon counter, take an extra turn, play a Magasai, untap it, proliferate, move the second counter from Nesting Grounds back onto Magasai, and then return Magasai to your hand, and then you can take infinite turns.
Yeah, so it's super convoluted, but it's basically everything land. Like, it's basically all just lands that are doing it. So.
Yep. The fact that it's a combo that can be done with just lands is pretty powerful. It's pretty convoluted, but, I guess it is there. It is a combo you can do.
That is true, yeah.
It's kind of one of my favorite land combos you can do.
So convoluted. If you get that off, no one can be mad.
Yeah, it's not that there's a lot of cards to it, but you need a lot of mana, and you kind of need a lot of setup.
So that's basically it for the video.
Yep, we hit most of the lands that we wanted to talk about. There's some other lands, but they're not as good in Commander.
There's a lot of lands in Commander.
It's just a lot of lands in Magic.
Yeah. So we're gonna get another card of the week.
Yep.
Which is?
Symbol of Unsummoning.
Yeah. So
this is an older card, but it's not as good as like the best cards we've had, but it's not as worst as the worst cards we've had.
No, I'd say it's an underrated card because it's so.
It's from Portal. It's a very cheap card,
Yep.
like 20 cents or less. And it is a sorcery for 2 colorless and 1 blue, and you get to return target creature.
Draw a card.
Yep, and draw a card. So, in some decks, that can be pretty good.
Orvar.
If you're playing Orvar, you have
Blink.
Peregrine Drake, Blink. Compared to all the other bounce spells, you get to draw a card.
That's true. So, obviously there's a lot better cards out there, but for 20 cents, look, it's pretty cheap. It's underrated, I'm sure. In Orvar, that's just, create a copy of a creature and then draw a card, which is pretty good for 3 mana.
Yep.
So, it's a sorcery, which is unfortunate, but
I'd say you can build a deck for it to have a place.
It has a place. Yeah.
And it's actually old enough that it has a quote from from a book. So it says, "Inviting the soul to wander for a spell in abysses of solitude," from The Awakening by Kate Chopin. So that shows you how old the card is.
Yeah. It's pretty old. It's from Portal. So.
Yep. Not much to be said about it.
So next is the adjournment. So we talk about stuff that's going on in the Magic world, basically. That's not related to the video. So today's is the Kaldheim New Capenna spoilers. So we've gotten a couple spoilers so far. We'll do a whole video on the entire set when it comes out, or we'll do a couple videos on it.
Once the set's fully spoiled, we'll go through it. But
so really, the only cards that have been spoiled for actual New Capenna, I know there's the secret layer cards that are being printed as Magic cards, Stranger Things ones. So, but we're gonna talk about just the cards that are in the New Capenna. So so far we got 3 of the Crime Lords, and we've got 3 Charms, and then we have Broker's Ascendancy. So I guess let's talk about Broker's Ascendancy first, and then we can get into it.
Okay, so Broker's Ascendancy says, At the beginning of your end step, put a 1/1 counter on each creature you control and a loyalty counter on each planeswalker you control, and it's an enchantment for a green, white, and a blue.
Yep.
It's
okay.
It's pretty low impact. You know, it has to happen at your end step, so anything that it happens has to make it through to your turn.
So if you're playing a Planeswalker deck, it's like...
I mean, if you have an Atraxa deck, you probably run this. Because it does a very similar thing at the end step. But in my opinion, it's a little slow, and it doesn't really get you a whole lot.
Yeah, it's okay.
Right away. So, not much to be said about it. It's not anything too crazy. But I guess, so let's move on to the Crime Lords.
Yeah, so we have 3 so far.
So, there is, I guess let's talk about Rafine first. Rafine Scheming Seer is a 1/4 for a white, blue, and a black. It has flying and ward 1, and it says whenever you attack, target attacking creature connives X, where X is the number of attacking creatures, which means you draw X cards, then discard X cards, and you put a +1/+1 counter on that creature for each non-land card discarded this way.
Yep.
So connives, I believe that was what set was that in?
That just came out here, I think. I think it's a new mechanic.
I thought it was in other. I'll have to check. But, so yeah, so there's
it's nice
Okay.
because it's 3 mana.
Yeah, it's really cheap.
But the problem is, I think a deck like this, you'd have to be careful because it could become overly reliant on the commander.
Yeah.
That ability, I mean,
this could be a stacked commander.
that's toxic.
because you just, he's really cheap to play. He's blue-white. You play stacks pieces, and then you attack, and then you connive, you draw cards, discard cards, and draw more stacks pieces. So
Yeah, it can draw. It's nice because it can draw you a lot of cards. It doesn't really do anything to win you the game.
No.
So you need to put you'll need to find some other way to win the game eventually, unless you intend to just discard a bunch of stuff and just win with commander damage with it, which could be interesting. But if your deck doesn't really have a whole lot of graveyard interaction, it's not really card advantage. So that's one thing. It's it draws you cards, but it's not card advantage.
Yeah.
Not much to be said. I think it could be interesting. Decks definitely could be powerful, but I don't think it's gonna be something that can just go and win the game that turn.
It's not gonna be a kill inside commander.
Yep, which is nice.
Yeah.
So, I guess let's move on to Jetmir, Nexus of Revels.
Yeah.
So, he is a 5/4 for 4, 1 colorless, a red, a green, and a white. So, he's 1 more mana, and he has creatures you control get +1/+0 and have vigilance as long as you control 3 or more creatures. And then has creatures you control get +1/+0 and have trample as long as you control 6 or more creatures, and creatures you control get +1/+0 and have double strike as long as you control 9 or more creatures.
So this is tokens.
A Naya token commander, nothing crazy. I mean,
It's 4 mana for 5/4, so there's that too.
I feel like it's a cat demon. I feel like there's more fun token commanders to have than this guy. I guess if you have 9 creatures, you have.
Let's say you have 9. Let's say you have 9. Let's say you play Vengeance Zendikar.
Yep.
And you have 6. We'll just say 6.
0/1 plants.
6 or 7 0/1 plants. Okay, they're all gonna be, no, you'd have to have 8.
Let's say you have 8.
No, because Avengers Zendikar in that, so you need 7.
So 7.
So you have 7 plants.
They'll all be
3 1 with double strike, vigilance, and trample.
That doesn't kill player yet, right? Oh, no, because you have 7 of them. Then it would. So,
Well,
I mean,
7 times 6. Okay, so that
without, yeah.
that I guess that in theory makes it so you present lethal to one player, but I feel like token decks have better ways to win.
Yeah, there's critters.
And I feel like token decks have better ways to win. So I feel like your commander probably should be a way to either generate tokens or get you value.
Yeah.
If you want to build a deck around him, you can. I just don't think he doesn't really do anything a whole lot of interesting or fun. He's kind of just a generic beat stick.
yeah, basically. Finally, for the Crime Lords, there's Lord Xander the Collector, and it's 4 colorless, Grixis, and for 1 blue-black red.
Right.
It's 6/6 Vampire Demon Noble, and it says when Lord Xander the Collector enters the battlefield, target opponent discards half their cards in their hand rounded down. It says when it attacks, defending player mills half their library rounded down, And then when it dies, target opponent sacrifices half the non-land permanents they control, rounded down. So, I mean,
So the thing is, so the attacks target player mills half their library rounded down. I think that's a pretty spicy ability and can win you the game. Can't win you the game, but it can kill a player.
Yeah, and if you have that one,
You know,
I don't know what it's called.
Brewback, and then there's
Brewback, yeah.
cards like Fraying Sanity, and all you have to do is maybe like be ready to mill like 1 or 2 more cards on top of that.
Yeah.
You know, it can provide a lot of value. The discards half the cards rounded down. That's not really that impactful in 4-player. You make one of your opponents discard like 4 cards at best.
Yeah.
Everything's rounded down, but the fact that when he dies he nukes is pretty nice because that punishes your opponents for, you know.
it's
targeting
target,
him.
so you're gonna have to make some friends. You want to make friends with the player or with the Lord Xander. So, another thing to think about is like if you have Terragrid out, it's pretty good.
Yep.
So, you know, when you enter the battlefield, if you have Terragrid out, you're already getting half someone's hand. And when it dies, they sacrifice that you get half their stuff that's on the battlefield. So, I mean, and then does milling count as discarding? No.
Okay. I was gonna
Cards that are really good with this guy are cards like Supernatural Stamina and cards
Yeah,
that
'cause
are
then
similar to that.
you'll
So,
get
like,
2.
So he dies, and then he comes
yeah.
back and gives you another ETB effect.
Do his original ETB, you put it on there, then he dies, and then he comes back, and then if you can kill him again, that's 2 of each trigger. So
That can get you a lot of triggers. He's 7 mana, which is kind of clunky. He's a 6/6, but I mean, at the same time, you know, he can kill a player.
I would say he's not overpowered, and he's also not bad, which is I think it's good. I think that's good.
Good
I think that's a good
And it's
commander.
nice for everyone
Who's named Xander if they want a deck with a guy named after them.
Just say we have a friend named Xander. He's pretty happy about it.
He doesn't play Magic though.
No.
Okay. Well, I guess the last ones we can talk about are the charms that are related to. None of these are actually that good, in my opinion, or at least,
they're okay.
yeah. So I guess let's talk about them in the same order we talked about the people. So the Obscura Charm is 1 white, 1 blue, 1 black, and you get to choose one. You can either return target multicolored permanent with mana value 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped. You get to counter target instant or sorcery spell, or you destroy target creature or planeswalker with mana value 3 or less.
I'd say this is the best one. It has a counter spell, it has a kill spell, and it has a return spell.
It can return its commander. It can return Rafine to the battlefield.
True, 'cause it's 3.
And it is an instant, so you can do that at like the end of turn. So if you're building a Rafine deck, this is, I'd say, an auto include.
If you're running, 4 colors, you could if you had like a Oko in your deck, you could return it because it's tapped. You're going to battlefield tapped, but planeswalkers don't care about being tapped, so.
Yeah, could be good in Planeswalkers, could be good in, if you're, just depends what you want to return with mana value 3 or less. A lot of decks, that's a lot of just like, I mean, it has to be multicolored, so that's kind of restrictive.
Yeah.
But, your deck definitely can be. And I could see myself wanting to run that in a deck. Counter trigger instant sorcery spell gives this some versatility if you're, can. So, okay, let's say.
Also destroyed Oko, I guess.
Yeah, it's for Planeswalkers, which that's good. Okay, let's say it's late game. Let's say you're losing. You can return something from your graveyard to the battlefield. Let's say you're winning. Then you can protect yourself while you're winning. Or let's say your opponents are winning. You can kill their stuff.
Yeah.
So I'd say that's definitely the best one of the 3. I like it. Let's move on. Yeah.
Sounds like has like a pasta. Cabaret Charm. It's 1 red, 1 green, 1 white. It's Naya. Instant, choose one. I'm gonna say Cabaret. I know I'm gonna keep saying that. Cabaret Charm deals damage equal to the number of creatures you control to target creature or planeswalker. Okay. Creatures you control get +1/+1 and gain trample. Okay. Create 2 1/1 green and white citizen creature tokens. It's token synergy. It's token themed, and I don't know. I'm not a huge fan.
So there's 2 charms I know of at least.
I mean, there's a ton of charms.
Well, in Naya. So there's Rith's Charm and Naya Charm. And I guess I want to talk about, I want to compare this one to those. So, Naya Charm. So, the Naya Charm, which is like the original one. I guess I don't know if this is the original one. Might be newer. But it has just 3 damage target creature. So it's the same mana cost. Choose one instant. 3 target creature. Return target card from graveyard to its owner's hand, or tap all creatures target player controls.
It's already better, I think.
I think every one of those abilities is better because creatures you control go +1/+1 and gain trample. In a token deck that doesn't do a whole lot.
Because they're not big.
They're not big.
And if they do get big, they usually get trample from something else.
Yeah, and then so I'd rather tap all my opponent's stuff down because let's say I have 2/2s. If my opponent has stuff, I'd rather be able to swing it. Maybe my stuff won't die.
How many times have you been in a situation where you played against someone that if you would have been able to tap all their creatures, you wouldn't have died?
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like,
you can do it instant.
You can save yourself. 3 damage target creature is pretty good. I'd say that is the only thing that maybe the other one does better is target number of creatures you control, target creature planeswalker. But I mean, the fact that you can get something from your graveyard is pretty good.
Yeah.
Rith's Charm, this one I like a lot, is 1 red, 1 green, 1 white. Same thing, instant. And you can destroy target non-basic land, put 3/1/1 green saproling creature tokens onto the battlefield, or prevent all damage a source of your choice would deal this turn. I'd say Rith's Charm is better because comparing it to the token generation, you get a whole nother token.
I still think Naya Charm is better than Wrist Charm.
I'd say so too.
But Wrist Charm is better than this one. Right?
So when I had my Rith deck, this was actually really good because let's say my opponent had a Maseveth, as we talked about earlier. I could destroy it. I could tutor for this with Sunforger.
That's right, Sunforger. Yeah, you could tutor for that.
I'd say the fact that you can... I think Rith's Charm's better. I think
you still run, if you're running a Sunforger type deck, I think you still run this card because this kill spell is pretty good.
Yeah, if you have a bunch of tokens, I mean, it's not a bad card. I just think the other charms we've gotten are better.
Yeah, I suppose.
Oh, I'm not out of that yet.
So last one.
Yep. So, the Maestro's Charm is a 1 blue, 1 black, 1 red to look at the top 5 cards of your library, put one of those cards into your hand, and the rest in your graveyard. Each opponent loses 3 life and you gain 3 life, or 5 damage to target creature or planeswalker. I'd say this one is probably the worst of...
Yeah, it's not that great.
I mean, you're paying 3 mana to look at 1 card from the top of your library and put it in your hand. And the rest in your graveyard, which I guess you have graveyard synergies, but compare Obscure Charm with the other one. Obscure Charm works really good with its commander because it can return it, it can protect it, or it can kill something. Cabaret Charm deals with giving stuff +1/+1. If you have double strike, that's pretty good. Makes tokens so you can you can obtain that goal, and it also works well if you have tokens. What does the Maestro's Charm do? It doesn't work well with its guy, and it has pretty low impact abilities.
Yeah, he doesn't even have graveyard synergies. The Lord Xander doesn't.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. I mean, they don't have to be great. I mean, they're okay. I wouldn't say they're bad, right? I mean, the versatility on this. If you're playing budget, if you're playing a budget deck, it's fine.
Compare this to Crosus's Charm, which I know exists. Is 1 blue, 1 black, 1 red to return target permanence to its owner's hand, destroy target non-black creature, or destroy target artifact.
That's just
I'd say, the kill spells are better.
Here's the thing: each opponent loses 3 life and you gain 3 life. That doesn't matter.
That's low impact, especially in Commander. I mean, the 5 damage target creature planeswalker can be a removal spell, but I feel like it's I feel like these are better almost. I feel like Crosus Charm is better.
Yeah, I agree.
I mean, I know there's also more charms that.
Yeah, there's a ton of charms.
Like the 3 color cycle. Okay, the other charm for Obscure, let's compare that one. So white, blue, black, destroy target enchantment, draw 2 cards, or target player discards 2 cards. I'd say Obscure is better.
As you said, draw 2 cards as well.
Draw 2 cards.
That's pretty good. But I do agree. I think this one's still better.
Yeah, I think the fact that it can be removal, protection, or I think it just provides a lot of value.
Yeah.
Oh, and then there's Dromar's Charm, which I guess we can compare that to that too.
That's the dragon one.
Yep. So you can gain 5 life, you can counter target spell, or target creature gets -2/-2 until end of turn.
That's still better.
Yeah, I'd say Obscure is still better.
So Obscure is pretty decent. I don't think it'll be expensive.
Yeah, I think you're right. I don't think it. Now I guess I should look for the Grixis Charm now since we've compared everything else to it. Right?
I suppose.
Grixis Charm. Return target permanent to its owner's hand. Target creature gets -4/-4 until end of turn, or creatures you control get +2/+0 until end of turn.
That one's better than Maestro's, I think.
I don't know. I mean...
Wait, what's the first one?
return target permanent to its owner's hand. Like, okay, are you going to use token synergies? I'd say Maestros is better than this one, but worse than Croesus's Charm.
I guess, yeah.
And so I think the Obscuras are actually pretty good, though. And I think that could, I'm not saying going to be a commander staple, but it could definitely be useful.
Yeah.
All right.
Well,
That's about it.
that's the intro.
So if you liked this video, make sure to like it. Share it with your friends. I guess if I'm sure more spoilers will come out soon. So how do you feel about these spoilers? How do you feel about the charms?
Low impact.
The Lord Xander's pre-sale price is $30, which makes me laugh. That thing is not going to be $30. Do not actually, just in general, don't pre-sale buy.
Pre-selling is risky.
Unless it's like for sure, but even then it's like yes.
Unless you are from the future and you know how much something's going to be.
And if you are,
Let us know. Let us know if you're from the future and let us know what to buy because we'll definitely do that. So yeah, that's about it. What are you excited for in New Capenna? I know I'm excited for the Triumphs.
I'm not, because I'm not going to buy the Triumphs.
I'm going to buy
Too
expensive.
I'm going to buy 2 sets of them because I need them for my decks because I love the Triumphs.
They're not Triumphs, though.
You're right, they aren't. I don't know.
Whatever.
The flavor fail.
So anyway, yeah, that's
Thanks
about
for
it.
watching. Bye.